Howdy everyone. I know it's been a while, but we're finally back with another episode of Exodite Ball Z. I have finally returned from the depths of hell with some progress on the Fire Prism, but before I show it off, we've had a pretty big jump in numbers from the last time we did one of these Exodite videos, so I wanted to very quickly skim over the experience for those who don't know or honestly just plain forgot at this point. So, in my last Exodite army video, I stated that I was going to use a Seltas Queen to act as my army's Fire Prism. While the regular Seltas Queen is not native to the desert, which is kind of the theme of this army, there is a desert variant of Seltas Queen, unimaginatively called Desert Seltas Queen. Initially, the plan was to get some 3D files that were extracted from the game and retouch them and then print them out. I managed to find those files and I reached out on Fiverr for someone to make the files printable, as in their current state they were just raw files straight from the game. The first guy I tried was odd, as he attempted to resculpt the whole thing and yeah, it didn't turn out so great. The second guy I contracted did a perfect job. All the files came out flawlessly, and most importantly, they were half the cost. I then spent a good little while printing out a bunch of prototypes to get the size of the Seltas Queen correct for not only in proportion to my infantry, but in proportion for a 130mm base that I was going to use. I eventually did settle on some good size, which I wish I could say, but for some reason, I don't know where the piece of paper that I wrote how much to scale the pieces to went. So, yeah, phase 2, sculpting. Now, when I say sculpting, I don't have 3D sculpting experience, but I do have 2D sculpting. Traditional sculpting, that's the word I was looking for. I'm sorry. The plan was to sculpt over the 3D print, for in its current state you could kind of tell that it was taken from a 3DS game, very polygonal, you know. Not to resculpt every little detail, but on the major surfaces that would be seen at a glance. Less attention on the inside parts, more attention on the outside. Then after everything was resculpted, I was going to recast everything with silicone molds. This project has been one of my longer going ones, as I've been doing it on and off for about 7 months. Since then, I have made 2 movie-length videos and lost $300. But that was a giveaway, so I can't I can't whine too much. While I was concerned about getting some videos on the channel to not have any downtime, I was working on this the entire time. During my downtime, which if I'm working on something during my downtime, that doesn't really make it downtime. But I mean, it got done eventually, which brings us to right now. When it comes to recasting, I don't have a ton of experience. Most of my recasting experience comes from using Oyumaru, also known as Blue Stuff, but when it comes to silicone molds, this was my first time doing anything remotely similar to that. Some of it worked, a lot of it didn't, but in general it was a really, really good learning experience. I learned a lot of how not to make molds. I won't really get into a more technical aspect for it because there are much more qualified people to properly teach how to recast things with resin and silicone molds. But from a first-hand experience, it wasn't too bad. The majority of the experience was basically experimenting with what kind of orientation with the pieces and how to properly cut vents to have the air escape whenever you pour in the resin. But as big of a headache as it was genuinely very enlightening. When it came to actually pouring the molds, I used the Smooth On Mold Star 16. This had a pretty fire and forget mixing ratio of just 1:1, part A, part B, But my main problem was the very, very short pot life. It was 6 minutes on the box. It's definitely way too short, and sometimes I was really rushing to get shit mixed up and poured, which did leave a lot of air bubbles onto the final molds, but I managed to work around it somewhat by working in small amounts at a time, never mixing more than like half a little cup. That being said, whenever my molds failed, I kept the silicone around for when I was pouring molds later on. I would stuff the empty cavities with the old silicone, and that helped fill out the volume of my molds, which meant I had to use less quote-unquote fresh silicone for the molds. Speaking of molds, I made my molds by first hot gluing the piece and the vent sub-assemblies down onto a piece of plastic card, and then I used plastic cups around the pieces. These little plastic cups were a godsend. I got them at Walmart for like, I don't know, like $2.50 or something for like 100 of them. They're perfect for mixing silicone and resin since they're just little plastic cups. I mean, you use them and you throw them away. But I also use these as my molds, which meant I could simply put the mold back into a duplicate cup whenever it came time to pour resin to hold it securely from all directions with even pressure. I think that was kind of a super big brain move on my end, if I do say so myself. Although I won't totally take credit for that. I might have picked it up somewhere from someone vastly more qualified and smarter than me. But, yeah, shut up. In general, though, this silicone was pretty easy to use as long as I worked with it quickly. In the future, I will definitely use the same brand because I had the quality of the silicone is good, but I think I will end up using a mixture with a longer pot life. Although I'm a bit hesitant to admit this, I'm kind of ashamed on how much of this silicone and resin I ended up wasting in general. These boxes of silicone, it's like, well, I say box, but it's like a box with two little containers, whatever. One order of silicone was $40 a pop, and the resin I was using was $20 a pop. I wasted so much silicone, I had to make 3 orders and 2 orders of resin. So, yeah, if we add all this up, it's not really a very economic project at all, considering the 3D print that I sculpted everything on top of was probably like 60 cents of water washable resin. So is this type of project for everybody? No, not at all. However, I can say that I can add silicone mold making experience to my repertoire. Plus the molds I made were very thick and durable, so they used extra silicone, but I did it on purpose. Somewhere down the line I may say, you know what, I want a 3rd Fire Prism, and these molds are so robust that I'm not worried about them being damaged in storage at all. And I may also make more recasts to maybe like give away one day. Not anytime soon. I desperately need a break from this project, but having that option on the table down the line, I think is the smart move. By the end of my struggle, I was left with 2 complete sets of parts for both of my queens, with enough very, very bad recasts to make maybe 1.5 shitty queens. To help keep the model transportable and compact, I decided to magnetize the tail subassembly. My friend Gino, the painting acolyte, made a vid where he shows off the perfect size of magnets for magnetizing Warhammer bases, and I wanted to give it a try, see if it actually works out, so I bought a batch of 100. This was not, just for magnetizing bases, but I could end up using them on this project as well, since they just happen to be a really good size for fitting 2 magnets in, which was pretty easy. I just ended up finding a drill bit that kind of matched in size, and drilled holes into the base, and make sure my polarity was right. Super glue, bada bing, bada boom. When it came to mounting magnets, though, I also mounted a magnet on top of the carapace a little bit towards the back. For why? That is the secret sauce of the whole project. This right here is a recreation of the old Eldar Fire Prism turret. I found it on Cults 3D a couple months ago, actually about half a year now, and we'll link the download for this in the description, just in case. Not only was this the perfect solution for a turret subassembly on top of this beast, but it's free too. The absolute Chad that made this isn't even going to charge me. Thank God. Putting a magnet in the bottom of the turret allows it to mount on top of the Seltas Queen, and I did add a little bit of green stuff, milliput, around the base as kind of a ring. That was going to act as the basis for a mounting harness, but like I said, I didn't finish that. I need a break from the Seltas Queen, you know? I'll come back to it one day, but right now, it's stable. I want to leave it at that. As the project went on, I was maybe growing a slight bit apprehensive of just slapping a Fire Prism turret on the back, but that's why I chose to magnetize it. If I wanted to later make a turret a little bit on the low-tech end, you know, like an open cockpit, you know, kind of subassembly that may look a little more in line with Monster Hunter, you know, I have the option of just pulling the magnet off and then putting a whole new turret assembly on top. That being said, nothing's really stopping me from gussying up this Fire Prism turret with, you know, some bones and trophies to make it a little more caveman-y, you know, to kind of blend it in with the aesthetic. But the beauty of the magnet is that I have the option to swap out down the line. Keyword, not right now. But without further ado, let me show you what I've made. Despite all my belly aching and the numerous issues plaguing the final result, I am tremendously happy to simply have this in front of me. Keep in mind that the crux of this project was simultaneously me not wanting to spend $130 on a Seltas Queen figure that ended up being extremely tiny, by the way. Like, that figure is like maybe 3.5 inches tall. Meanwhile, my Seltas Queen here stands almost 6 inches tall. It's twice the size. And at a glance, when you compare it to infantry models, it actually does kind of look pretty similar to what you see in game. Now, granted, most of my monsters are a little on the small end, but there is a bit of size variation built into the game, so you're not just fighting the same bosses over and over. You know, some might be a little bigger and some might be a little smaller. And I like to think that kind of helps make everything kind of fit. But yeah, compared to a $130 Seltas Queen figure, let me add up everything I've got here. So, for the Fire Prism project here, we've got $60 for whatever the fuck that first sculpt was. $35 for the guy who actually fixed the 3D files. Thank you, guy in India, whose name I forgot. 3 boxes of $40 silicone. 2 boxes of $20 resin. $30 for silicone mold release and plasticine that I didn't even end up using, so, you know, cool. $25 for the entire box of milliput I end up gluing to this thing, and $10 for 330mm bases. We're not going to count the pennies of resin I used to print out the skeleton for this, and I'm not going to factor in the magnets since they're more of a general use expense, but this is, I mean, compared to 3D printing, this is just not really financially viable unless you're making a very, very large, well, I can't even say that. Yeah, there's no reason for to do this. This is a lot of money compared to 3D printing. It was mainly the experience. Plus, you know, I can't like 3D print the details I sculpted on, you know. Here on screen, I'm showing off both queens. One queen is in a more neutral pose, and one queen is got her front leggy up, for a dynamic kind of like foot on a rock pose when I eventually get to doing the bases. I've got an idea for the bases in mind. It's not going to be just all boring sand, but I'm still trying to look at a decent texture paste. I'm trying to ask around, see what people kind of have in mind for good brands. And I've kind of got my eye on some, but I'm trying to vet out some choices there. But whenever I get some good texture paste, I think I'll start planning out bases. With 2 Fire Prisms built right now in Warhammer 10th edition, this brings my army up to 650 points with the current codex, which is a lot less than I initially thought I had in this army. At the very least, I can rest knowing that my main battle tank is done and dusted, besides the paint and the base and all that. Building, it's done and dusted, okay? Going forward, I don't think I'm going to need to make 2 of any large vehicle like this. And I say vehicle as in, living bug creature. So any new vehicle additions shouldn't nearly take this long since I'm not making molds like this. Knock on wood. But yeah, when it comes to the next projects, I think they'll be a little faster when I'm actually getting down to doing them. Since the premiere of Your Dudes 2, we've had some new members join the Patreon, and I'd like to give them a quick shout out. Mr. Rebo Norton, Line, and TK. Patreon support helps this channel tremendously, and I truly appreciate every single one of my patrons. I give weekly updates on what I'm doing behind the scenes, including some peeps at some models in advance. I'm currently on the hunt for a better video camera, and Patreon support is a big part of what allows me to, invest in that camera and make these videos and resupply on silicone after I completely fuck up numerous batches of it. Seriously, it's it's an embarrassing amount of silicone. I am an idiot. But if you like what I do here on the channel, please consider supporting me. You don't have to. My content will always be free, so even if you don't want to do any of that, I just really appreciate having you here and watching my videos. So, thank you. If you kind of squint and cover one eye, the Exodites are sort of starting to resemble a proper army, I've got a squad of infantry, some bikes, an HQ, and now I've got some heavy support, so I'm kind of debating on where I want to go next. Logically, another squad of guardians makes sense, either ranged or melee, I'm not too sure. I'm kind of foaming at the mouth to make some howling banshees. I've had some really good ideas for that for like a year now, and I kind of feel like that would be like a shot in the arm for the army, but I'm also a heavy bow gunner at heart. Some Dark Reapers would actually be really cool as well. I keep eyeing the new Striking Scorpions, not to use those models in particular, but I just really like Striking Scorpions, and it could be another option, but I can't really think of a good way to make their loadout interesting. The Sword and Shield is kind of an obvious choice there, but thinking about it, I could probably, do like long swords. Hammers kind of also makes sense there as well. Sort of, I don't know, it's kind of a stretch for both longsword and hammer, but to just fill the army with just sword and shields would be a little bland, so I'm kind of looking for ways to kind of spin a melee unit like that. Either that or maybe another single vehicle. I do have plans for wave serpents, but especially in 10th edition you can't have enough characters, and I do have a rough idea for a Farseer, but yeah, I gotta think it over. Maybe we'll do like a Night Spinner or something. But yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you like my Fire Prisms, because it was a pain in the ass, but I think they came out really cool, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next one. Thank you.